Hi, this is Todd Leonard,
And my name is Herb Montgomery.
and we're just talking.
Before we begin this week, please take a moment to hit that like button and that subscribe button there on your screen.
And if you'd like to be notified when our new episode drops each week, click that bell icon as well.
Each week, we will be talking about the gospel lectionary reading for the upcoming weekend.
And we'll be talking about each reading in the context of love, inclusion, and societal justice. And our hope is that our talking won't be just talking, but it will be even more than that. And I feel like I resonate a little bit. This is really always scary to say this when you think you can feel a little bit like Jesus, Herb. But I feel like I've been in the wilderness for a few days now because I've been coming home on a road trip. And so I've been on the road for about 15 hours and I'm toast, man. So I can only imagine as we're getting into the story today of Jesus being tempted in the wilderness, what it would be like to be him going through such a thing for such a long period of time, because I'm tasting just a little bit and I hope I have something valuable to say other than I do know that in the temptations there are three of them, and I've got that down, and that's my contribution. Now, Herb, you give us the rest and I'll just listen in.
No, I am so thankful. I'm so grateful to you in knowing how tired you are to be willing to put aside some time this evening to record this, Todd. So I really appreciate you.
It's only because I
These
love you, Herb. It's only
stories,
because I love you.
yeah, these stories, I love you too, Todd. These stories are they're part of the earliest Jesus tradition. They go all the way back. I mean, even scholars that subscribe to, and I know there's a whole spectrum of beliefs out there, but even Q theory and all of that. That these stories of the legends of Jesus' three temptations in the wilderness are some of the oldest parts of the Jesus story. And again, I want to remind our listeners that I think that the original association was to be with a liberation theme here. The original liberation mythos, the liberation narratives of the Hebrew people. Involved them wandering in the wilderness, being tested for 40 years. And here we have Jesus in parallel fashion being in the wilderness for 40 days and then being tested or tempted, and these were parallels that the original audience, they were, as they heard these stories, I think they were supposed to connect these and kind of
Mm-hmm.
see that, oh, we're talking, this is what we're talking about here, this is back to our liberation theme. The very first one, what jumps out at me is not living by bread
And you know what, Herb,
alone.
before I should say
um
right here, before we go even any further, in case anybody is not clear on where we are this week, we're in Matthew 4, verses 1 through 11. That's the lectionary reading for this week. I failed to say that right out of the gate. So just to make sure
that's
clear,
all right, Todd.
we're in Matthew's telling of the account this time. Sorry,
That's right.
that's
And
that's all,
and
that's
and
my
we're going
other
to give
thing that
lots
I'm
of grace
contributing.
tonight, Todd, because yeah, right. I know that you're asleep on your feet, man. So lots of grace. So this not by bread alone idea. I mean, what was happening societally around this story is the elites of Jesus' society were all about the bread, all about power, privilege, property. There was complicity with the Roman Empire that was taking place that was benefiting them as the elite social class. But the urban poor and the rural farmers and agricultural communities, they were being, well, Roman imperialism was immensely destructive for those communities. So the elites were getting ahead. They were becoming wealthier. Some were gaining more power through complicity with the Roman Empire. But that was coming at a deep cost that was being paid by the masses, by the people. So this story of having Jesus, Matthew's version of this story, having Jesus say that we shouldn't be living by just bread alone, would have resonated with them. And I think it resonates with us today too, Todd. I mean, we live in a capitalist society where many times profit's the bottom line,
Right.
shareholders, CEOs. Yeah.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
mean,
I think you're looking at a a complete condemnation of the systems that were, and a condemnation of, if you have the opportunity to get yourself to that same place by yourself and just take care of yourself at the expense of others, you are no better than the system that you're so angry against, that the system that has mistreated you so poorly. If you all of a sudden change your tune as soon as you get the chance to step in and step up to the upper class, uh, and all of a sudden then everything is honky dory for you, you have not accomplished. This is a flat out condemnation of this. This is not ever, and we always have to remember, when Jesus is rejecting the powers that be and condemning the powers that be, he is not saying, I just want to get my team in power and subjugate other people. It is always about, no, there's a whole different way of doing things. And we're not going to just continue to live in this way of wealth acquisition as the bottom line for why we exist and what drives our happiness and our success.
yeah, I love that. One of the critiques that I recently came in contact with by indigenous people here in America, indigenous Christians, is that it was their critique of socialism, and I'm always bagging on capitalism, so I was shocked a little bit to hear someone bag on socialism for a moment, but the indigenous critique of socialism, it lumped it right in with capitalism, saying, okay, so you give production back into ownership of production, you give that back into the power of the workers. That's great, but it's still an exploitative production
Right.
process where we're still damaging indigenous populations, and we're still ruining the planet, and we're still hurting mother nature, and we're still there's still all this
Mm,
extraction and exploitation taking place. But okay, great, you've taken it out of the capitalist hands and you've put it now into the control of the workers hands, and now they're profiting off of it.
yeah.
It's exactly what you were saying. It's you've just changed hands, you've not really changed the system intrinsically, inherently.
It's not a system. We're what Christ understood from the early times, and it only seemed to grow as he continued his mission, was this sense that it only that we're on a total different. He is on an entire different system of operation, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that indigenous insight is so powerful, because I think that you're getting back to something very primitive and basic about fellow man, that Jesus is trying to speak to here, that 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 creates a harmony among all things, and he's living in a time and place, and the devil is asking him to continue to operate in a time and place of out of balance exploitation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what a relevant time to even be thinking about this too, because not only do we have the poor still, but we are living in a time where if something doesn't change environmentally in the next 10 years, I mean, we don't even have 10 years. In the next 10 years, it's just going to continue to get worse. I
Yeah.
mean, to think that we shouldn't live by bread alone, or by profit alone, rather. Um, we need to be looking long term. What is life? What not short term gain, but what is long term life giving for all of us? Because now we're on the razor's edge when it
Yeah.
comes to the environment. Even
That's right.
we've got to start making different decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and also, I want to say this too. I didn't plan on sharing that about that indigenous insight, and I want to credit it And I just don't have the reference off the top of my head, but it was one of last year at Renewed Heart Ministries. We do a book of the month every month, and if someone will go to renewedheartministries.com and just look at last year's recommended reading, you'll see it there. It's by a Native American Christian theologian that I
If we
just
can pull
can't.
it up, we can add it to the comments
All right,
underneath the
I'll do it.
video. We can
I'll
do that.
find it afterwards, but I just want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
The second temptation to me is the hardest for me to get my head around. I always grapple with this one each year when it comes up in the lectionary. And, Jesus being taken to the pinnacle of the temple and being tempted to throw himself off with the verse quoted there that God will, bear him up on angels' wings or take care of him lest he dash his feet upon the stone. And that implication to sacrifice yourself in a presumptuous way for the good of the cause, knowing that the divine the sacred will take care of you. I wrestle with that one. What is a modern day application? And I'm just being honest. I mean, it's really hard for me to find a modern day application. But then I remembered that this is a little bit different version than Luke's version, which always hints to me that whoever the author of Matthew is, they're putting their own spin on it. They're putting their own that makes the story that they're using for their own agenda, for their own purpose. And I was thinking about the context in which I believe that the whole version of the Jesus story in Matthew was written, and that was post destruction of Jerusalem. So and during the whole Jewish Roman war, you had prophets promising success, zealots promising success again, that God would come down and give us the victory if we would just step out first, put ourselves at risk, step out at first. God would meet us in the battlefield and give and win the day, and we would win our liberation from Rome. And what ended up happening was not a divine intervention where people's feet weren't dashed upon the stones, but just massive decimation by the Roman Empire of the Jewish people during the Jewish Roman War, 66 to 69, leading up to the destruction there of the temple and the city in 70. So I think that the original audience would have seen this and said, yeah, we know exactly what that's like, being tempted to sacrifice yourself for the good of the cause, knowing that something good will come out of it. And I know that language kind of sounds positive, but it's not. I mean, and I want to be careful because I think social location matters in this context, in this subject. I think that those that are propertied, powerful, and privileged, that they could experience some type of sacrifice that would be life-giving, both to themselves and to those who are being harmed by the system that benefits them. So I'm not against sacrifice in that sense. If it's that social location, that people in that social location that are sacrificing, I think calling that self-sacrifice is a little bit of a misnomer, because I think they're getting in touch with themselves when they do that. I think their humanity is being restored in that kind of sacrifice rather than being sacrificed. When we give up something we could have because there's we're looking at it more holistically, like we talked about a minute ago. So I want to be very careful not to talk against that kind of sacrifice. But when we talk about self-sacrifice of the oppressed or the abused for a cause, that's where we need to start walking very softly and carefully. I think of how many of my LGBTQ Christian friends who have been asked by pastors to keep showing up in toxic religious sacred environments in the hopes that somehow their presence and their modeling of Christianity or modeling of whatever, I don't know, will somehow change the hearts and minds of straight, cisgender, bigoted Christians. And basically, they're putting themselves in harm's way. They're being asked to throw themselves off the temple, to put themselves in harm's way with the hope of changing the hearts and minds of those who are doing damage to them. And one of my friends used to say, always in kind of Ben Kenobi, tones. I'm not the sacrificial lamb you're looking for. and
Yeah,
and and
right.
and, and, so I think we need to be careful. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm I'm asleep. I'm sorry, I can't. I'm so out of it. No, I do actually. I actually have a thought, Herb. I think I have a cogent thought, and I agree with what you were saying as far as. Uh, I think it's we have asked. You speak about the LGBTQ folks being asked to show up and sacrifice themselves for the sake of the church. And I remember Martin Luther King having people tell him, just wait a little longer, wait a little longer, wait a little. Don't move so fast. Don't ask for all this at once. Don't ask for all these rights and for everything to change all at once. Just keep being nice and slow and slow, and we'll get there eventually. You can't just keep sacrificing yourself for the sake of peace and calm for those of us who are in the positions of power and authority. So it's your very excellent point. The other thing that I think sticks out to me a little bit is just the whole the fact that he was standing on top of the temple, and for them, for the Jewish readers of Matthew now are without a temple. The temple is in shambles, and Jesus
Mm-hmm.
being asked to jump off that, and he'll be saved, and somehow it almost sounds like in some way, and the temple will be saved is almost like the way that we understood how things were supposed to be, with the temple at the heart of everything, that this was going to be how it works. And I think maybe part of this is Matthew gently encouraging his readers to say, to understand, perhaps the kingdom of God is something different than what you were expecting. Perhaps this temple as the center of everything doesn't have to be the center of thing, and the kingdom can still move forward. The work of God continues without this pinnacle of the Jewish faith existing anymore. That when Jesus said, "I'm not going to throw myself for this or anything else," as he doesn't give into the temptation to make his own bread, to make his own wealth, he also doesn't put his hope in the security of Jewish triumph and uh and superiority arising again, in a sense. I think that there's something hints to me of that, and I may or may have no basis for that, but there's something there about recognizing that the kingdom of God would move on and move forward, that God would be with his people in other ways.
Yeah, and whether that's actually in the story or not, I don't know. I can't speak to that, but I do like exactly where you're headed with that, because Karen Armstrong tells this great story in her book. I think I forget the title of that book too. Man, it's not a good night for references. I should like
We're hitting
we
on
have
all
to.
cylinders, buddy.
Sorry. Um, uh, Oh, the beginning of our. I don't remember the title. Anyway, she tells this story, and my whole point in bringing this up is that this was not a Christian conversation. These were conversations that were happening within Judaism
Right.
during this time when the temple was no more. She tells this story of two rabbis that walk out. It's a proverbial story, not a historical one, but these two rabbis that walk out and look at the ruins of Jerusalem, and one of them says, "What a shame that atonement can no longer be made, for we don't have a temple." And the other rabbi says, "No, we have something even more powerful than the rituals of the temple. As Hosea said, I desire love, not
Mm,
sacrifice." And this is a conversation not between Christians versus Jews, but between two rabbis within Judaism,
mm,
saying that loving deeds is more powerful than anything we used to do in that temple. As sad as that history is,
mm.
loving deeds is what's going to carry us through. And so I think, yeah, that's important.
And again, the self-sacrificial model, the the losing the ability to offer sacrifices in the temple, or asking Jesus to sacrifice himself from throwing himself off the temple, or asking Jewish uh, uh, nationalists who had lost to the Roman Empire to continue to try to sacrifice themselves for the sake, and somehow maybe this is all speaking to that thing of no, 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 no. There's something more. There's something better. There's
Different
something.
path,
There's a
different way.
different path to this, and to go back to those, the marginalized who have been asked to throw themselves again and again and again, I would say you there is a different path going on, and there is no reason for you to be staying inside toxic communities. There is no reason for you to be the one taking the fall for a system that has harmed you again and again and again. Forget that. You get to a healthy place, you move on, and you live into the love of God and the love of fellow man. This is the way, this is the path that we're heading in, that Jesus is pointing to and Matthew is writing about.
Yeah, you could say that 1,000 times tonight, Todd.
Yep.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying about there's a different path, there's a different way, this is going to be a different type of thing. This is important to me, not just in the context that we've talked about tonight, but also in the context of nonviolence, because I teach nonviolence and I subscribe to nonviolence as a way of resisting and not passively enduring, but resisting injustice and unjust systems. Too often in nonviolent circles and in nonviolent teachings, people are taught to sacrifice themselves to try and change the hearts or to appeal to the consciences of their oppressors or their abusers. And I think I wrote at length about that this week and in our e-sites at renewedheartministries.com. The title is, if you're looking for it afterwards, if you're watching this and you're looking for that article, the title is "Sacrificing Our Humanity to Change the World." I think this second temptation also speaks to oppressed communities, that we don't need to test fate, we don't need to test God, and we definitely don't need to test or depend on the awakening consciences of our oppressors. That is dangerous business. I think of women who have been told to stay in abusive relationships in the hopes of changing their partner's heart, and how that has proven lethal. And it's dangerous business. And I know Christianity has been used to do that. And so I want to make sure that if we're talking about this tonight, that we at least verbalize there's another option. You don't have to interpret the stories that way. That's dangerous. And some resources, if that's a new thought for people or a thought that resonates with you. Some resources are Brown and Parker's essay, "God So Loved the World?" ? If you just Google "God So Loved the World?" , like a question, and put in Brown and Parker, the very first thing that comes up will be their essay. Well worth the read. And another is Dolores Williams, womanist Dolores Williams, in her book "Sisters in the Wilderness," pages 175 through 177. She also speaks about this, especially in the context of the Black community and Black women specifically. And again, I think social location matters. I think there are some people out there whose humanity can be restored by them practicing a little sacrifice. But I think there are others in a system, and I think Jesus saw this in the story, that if you're in a system where yourself is already being sacrificed by the injustice of the system, Jesus's plan to heal the world doesn't come through sacrificing yourself even more. It's about reclaiming and restoring your humanity, not sacrificing it.
Yeah, the first thing Jesus does is proclaims an end to systems in his mission statement. When he reads from Isaiah, from in Luke 4, he says, "I've come to end the oppression. I've come to end the imprisonment. I've come to end these things. Anyone who's under oppression, that's to end." And he is there is nowhere where he is calling for those who have gone through so much to continue to beat on themselves. And I think
Yeah.
I think
Don't put
you've made that
yourself in
point
harm's
well.
way. What
Right.
what good is liberation if you're not around to what good is accomplishing liberation if you're dead in the end to
Right.
to to, when it comes about. Um yeah, that last temptation, uh, you're talking about systems being done away with. In this last temptation, Jesus is offered all of the unjust systems in the world, all of the systems in the world. This is how we're going to change. And this speaks to me of a lot of Christians today. Um, if you just get control of the governing power,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying that Christians shouldn't be involved in, or that you shouldn't. I'm not saying that you shouldn't vote or you shouldn't be involved in your civic duty, and you shouldn't be involved in the systems trying to change them. But there's a sector of Christianity today, one side of Christianity today that's saying if we can just get in power, then we can enforce how we think the world should operate on everyone.
Right.
And Jesus has offered that here. He's offered all the kingdoms of the world, all the power of the world. That's how you can change the world, Jesus. Here it is. You can have it all. And he says no. He chooses instead to say, no, I'm going to change the world by standing up for the humanity, the marginalized, the disenfranchised, and the underprivileged. And that's a different path. So again, I think all three of these temptations, I think what they're addressing, and we're so far removed from their original audience's culture that it's hard for us
Mm-hmm.
to see, but they're addressing three different options, three different ways that movements in Jesus's day promised world change, three different
Mm-hmm.
means of changing the world. And Jesus rejects all three of them and says, no, let me offer you a different path.
Yeah.
And I mean, without defining what that path is tonight, I think the temptations are, at least in the very beginning of the Jesus story, telling us what this story is not going to be about.
Right. Absolutely. I think, and I think if you look at early Christian history, that the nascent, or the nascent start of Christianity, that was just a faction of Judaism, slowly becoming what then maybe have been called people of the way. Those first few decades, first century, you actually see uh, the followers of Jesus actually creating a countercultural community in the way that
Mm-hmm.
they serve one another, and pointing to, we will honoring the system may not support and honor us, and we may never ascend to their levels, but that's not the point anyway. We can move in a different direction. We can move to make sure that we look after one another and serve one another. And the early Christian story is of marginalized people groups coming
Mm-hmm.
together, building community, looking after one another, and honoring one another in a way that they were never going to get from the empire. And in fact, they stop looking to the empire to solve their problems, or looking to see the empire overthrown. And instead, they start really paying attention to one another and serving one another. And so, even in the midst of a very unjust system, you see this eruption of a counterculture that is more in
Mm-hmm.
harmony with the person of Christ. And I think
Yeah.
that, again, pointing to that, of saying, as much as, yeah, like you said, you can be voting, you can be involved in politics, but understand you're still operating in a system that is fundamentally flawed. And so
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, at the same time that you may be trying to, in your position, whatever it is, to try to work to make things a little more just in your existing power structure, there's a whole lot of grassroots undermining work that can still take place uh, in the midst of unjust empire.
Yeah. Yeah. The three things pop out to me in response to what you just said. Number one, Christians are notorious about doing charity and not justice. They're notorious
Mm-hmm.
about doing personal individual work. And that's not what we're saying tonight, that there is
Right.
still a place there's a place to do that. If someone's drowning, then by all means pull them out of the river. But at some point, you got to walk up the banks, as they say, and pull people out of the river. Second thing that I wanted to talk about is, or say in response to that, was what you're describing is what liberation communities call building a new world within the shell of the present one.
Mm-hmm.
While the present one's still there, you're building this new world underneath, and that doesn't mean you can't work for systemic change at the either. And the last thing is that in all of these kind of multi approach, we're doing, we're helping people in our personal individual lives. We're challenging the system, that create the need for charity to begin with. We're doing all of that. But along the way, as we're envisioning this new world and we're working toward that, we're also doing damage mitigation in the process. That there's a place for doing damage mitigation along the way, and sometimes voting isn't about creating that new world. Since we're talking about voting tonight, I don't know how I brought it up, but that's not what we were supposed to talk about tonight. But many times voting is not because this person is your ideal best option. It's literally, it's just what's going to cause the least amount of damage to the most marginalized people. It's damage mitigation. So yeah, we are to be challenging and changing the system.
Yes.
Because the system is messed up. We're also supposed to be doing individual, our personal, work of helping people. But then we're also supposed to be doing damage mitigation at the same time. So it's a multi-pronged approach. But all of it, I love at the heart of it is that, yeah, we're creating this new thing, whether we call it the kingdom or the beloved community or kingdom or whatever term we give it. We're creating something new as Jesus followers that cares about people's safety, about justice, about inclusion, all of that.
Yeah, it's just good treachery work. It's just all that stuff as we are all agents of undermining the system, and we do it through loving kindness, and we do it through speaking out against the system, and we do it by healing those who have been harmed by the system. And that's
all.
all.
And loving kindness is not always nice.
No.
Don't those aren't always synonyms. Sometimes it's nice, but sometimes it's confrontational.
It's right.
Yeah. Well, that's all I've got this week, Todd. I mean, again, these are the three temptations, the three temptation legends in the beginning of Matthew's version of the Jesus story. Again, I don't think they give us a lot of explaining to us what Jesus is going to be about in Matthew's version of the story, but they are definitely signaling to that original audience who would have understood these temptations, at least signaling to them that this is different. This is not these three things. This is something separate or unique or special or something. It's a narrative device to try to say this is what Jesus is not about. Now, let me tell you the rest of the story to show you what he is about.
Very good.
And it speaks to me because too often I've been raised in sectors of Christianity that were about all three of these things. I mean, getting the bread, you know what I mean? Like the prosperity preachers out there I grew up at PTL with Jim Bakker and Tammy Faye. And that's a whole different story, but that was my introduction to Christianity, was being part of their ministry, living there on that in the midst of all of that. Talk about just getting bread alone.
We're wrapping up tonight's episode, and you just dropped this bombshell. Like, everybody just wants now to know everything about PTL and Jim and Tammy Faye, and you just, oh my goodness! So, wow, way to keep a captive audience for next week.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. There's more to tell. Yeah,
nice.
Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll pick it up next week.
Well, listen, I'll be better rested next week, and we will get those. Herb will find those citations that he talked about earlier in the show, and we're going to keep plugging away and doing the best we can. But we're having a lot of fun. We hope you're enjoying this journey with us of diving into the text, and we hope that you have. See, now I'm supposed to go to a script. and I was supposed to do that seamlessly.
That's
And
all right.
but see,
You're
I can't even
asleep at the
do
wheel tonight.
that seamlessly. But if you liked what we said, uh, and please share this with your friends, post it on your social media timelines. And again, one more time, make sure if you haven't already to click the subscribe button and the like button, and ring that bell if you want to be notified of when the next episode drops.
We hope our talking tonight has been just, and we hope that something we've said tonight has inspired you to also do more than just talking. Thanks for watching this evening. You can find me at renewedheartministries.com. Todd, where can they find you?
You can find me in bed. Also at toddjleonard.com and at my church, glendalecitychurch.org. And thanks, everybody, for spending your time with us. We'll see you next week.